Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for another edition of To Your Health here on GBMC Facebook Live. I am your host, John Lazaru. Today we're going to talk about a very sensitive subject matter, actually two subject matters, sexual assault, and also we're going to talk about child abuse. For those of you, maybe you know this, maybe you don't, but there are approximately 320,000 cases of rape, or victims of rape and sexual assault in the U.S. yearly. That is an astronomical high figure. But the other one that's of a concern is that 1 in 10 children will be sexually assaulted by the time they reach the age of 18. So joining us today to talk about sexual assault and also child abuse is Laura Clary, our clinical program manager from the GBMC SAFE program. Laura, I want to thank you for joining us again. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me again.
Laura, I know we met a couple of months ago and we spoke about a myriad of subject matters, but let's stick today with sexual assault and child abuse. For those of you also, just so you know, that April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and it's also Child Abuse Prevention Month. Did I think I got that right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, Laura, thank you for joining us again. We got a lot of things to get to, so we'll get rolling. Let's start off first. Can you explain to our audience and those that are joining us on Facebook, what is the GBMC SAFE program and what does SAFE actually stand for?
So SAFE stands for Sexual Assault Forensic Examination Program, and basically what our program does is provides special medical forensic services and crisis counseling for patients that come in who have been a victim of sexual assault, domestic violence, intimate partner violence, human trafficking, and child abuse.
So for yourself and your colleagues that work in the SAFE program, what kind of training do you have to go through to be involved in this field?
So first and foremost, we always say we are registered nurses. Our main goal is to take care of the health and well-being of our patients. So all of the nurses that are in our program are registered nurses as well as forensic nurse examiners. We are all certified through our Maryland Board of Nursing, and it includes a bunch of different requirements. So you have to take an accredited course, which is about 40 hours of didactic classroom time, as well as some clinical requirements, working with the Baltimore County Police Department, with the crime lab, doing some share time with them, as well as doing a few months working with an experienced precepting forensic nurse until you really feel comfortable being able to take care of these patients independently.
Okay, so we talked about sexual assault. Can you give us a clear definition of what is sexual assault, and also can you enlighten the audience and myself on some of the signs or some of what you should look for in a friend or a family member that they might have been sexually assaulted?
Sure. So sexual assault has many different forms, and how we think about it is there's any type of sexual contact with someone else without the explicit consent from that person, or done by force or coercion. When we see patients, we always say there's really no right or wrong way to react to trauma. Everyone handles these situations differently. So things that we tell people to look out for are, first and foremost, if someone comes to you and says that they were a victim of sexual assault, the first thing you should do is tell them that you believe them and that you're there for them for support, because that's really, really important. But things you can look for is if you have a friend or a family member that was maybe really engaged in a sport or another activity, and you start to see them becoming isolated and turning away from things that they previously enjoyed doing. If you notice that somebody is starting to use drugs or alcohol or has a really abrupt change in their personality, it may be something to initiate a conversation to see if something more is going on. Everyone kind of discloses abuse and assault when they're ready to. There's no right or wrong time when they do that.
Joining us today is Laura Clary, Clinical Program Manager for our SAFE program, Sexual Assault Forensic Examination. That's the acronym there. I encourage you all that are watching us on Facebook to please send in your questions in the comment section, or for privacy reasons, please feel free to private message us on Facebook. And I encourage our audience members who are here today to please raise your hand, and my colleague Mindy over there, she'll be able to get your questions and we'll be able to ask Laura those important questions and get some good information today. Laura, we talked about sexual assault. I know later on, as a matter of fact, this coming Saturday, we have the Walk a Mile in Her Shoes event.
Yes.
Can you just talk a little bit about that event and what its goal is and its purpose?
So it's a super fun event. It's held right at the beautiful GBMC campus. And basically the goal is not just to raise funds for our program. So we are nonprofit. None of our patients receive a bill for any of the services that we provide in our program. So it's fun so that we can continue operating smoothly. So aside from raising funds, it's really important to also raise awareness. Awareness in the community that these issues do happen right here in our backyards, in our communities, and raise awareness about this program that we have to offer at GBMC so that victims don't feel alone, so that they know that they have somewhere that they can go to seek treatment. So I would say personally the most important thing about this benefit is raising that awareness.
Now, I know that if you look at the logo over there, we have a red sneaker, but in the past we've had participants wear red high heels,
Yes.
whether you're a male or a female.
Yeah.
Do they still have to wear the red high heels? And also, how long is the walk?
So it's a 1 mile walk. It is not required that you wear red high heels, although a lot of people still do wear the red high heels in the walk. But you can really come out and wear any kind of shoes that you want to. Just getting out there and walking with us and, again, raising that awareness, that's what's most important about this event.
Once again, Laura Clary, Clinical Program Manager from our SAFE program. Laura, let me ask you this. We'll continue more on the event. But if anybody wants to find out some more information about the SAFE program and also just to get some details, what's the best way to do this?
So we have a really great website that you can visit at www.gbmc.org/safe, and you can go right to that website and be linked to a lot of resources in the community, learn more about what the nurses and the advocates do in our program, as well as any kind of contact information you would have about how to get a hold of someone from the SAFE program.
And also for those of for our viewers today who are joining us on Facebook and in the audience, GBMC also has a Facebook page too, correct?
We do. So we have a Forensic Nurse Examiners at GBMC Facebook group that you can join. It is open, so you can just go in and put in a request, and then you can actually ask SAFE nurses different questions. You can learn about all the different events that we're having and some facts about our program.
Give that website one more time if you can, please.
The GBMC
Yes,
SAFE? Yeah.
yeah.
So it's www.gbmc.org/safe.
So you hear that, community members? If you need more information, that's where to go. Speaking of the community and our neighbors to the GBMC campus, how important is the community's involvement with the SAFE program, not just through Walk a Mile, but also other initiatives that you guys hold throughout the year?
So again, I think it's important to recognize that we are nonprofit. So we rely so much on community support and very generous donors from the community that see the value in the work that we do and want to support the work that we do. So we rely heavily on our community, and again, just that awareness about this program. And we try to get out and do a lot of community outreach so that people do know the services that we have to offer. And I think outreach is a huge part of my job as well as the job of the forensic nurses that work for me.
I just want to repeat again, the services you offer to victims, there's no charge.
There's no charge.
Right? Okay.
Right. So the medical forensics and advocacy services that we provide are all free of charge for patients that come through our doors.
Okay. So for the funds that are raised, just one more time for our audience and those watching us on Facebook, the funds that are raised from Walk a Mile and other initiatives, how are they used within the SAFE program?
So we use them for a lot of different things. So one of the really great things that we're able to provide is getaway bags for our patients. So if we have a patient that comes in a domestic violence situation or a human trafficking situation, sometimes they come in with just the clothes on their back and that's it. So we're able to provide these bags that have, you know, just things that we take for granted every day. So toiletries and toothbrush, undergarments, and sometimes we give them a cell phone so that they can safely communicate with the SAFE program as well as with law enforcement. In addition to these getaway bags, we need to keep the unit operating smoothly with trained SAFE nurses. So all of the funds raised too help us to stay staffed so that we can continuously train nurses to provide the service. And we train nurses not just for GBMC, but we've trained nurses from all over the country. We've had nurses travel here from Africa to take the course. We train physicians in the military. So it's a really sought out training program that we offer at GBMC.
And I'm glad that we talked about these initiatives, because joining us in our audience today is, and I hope I get her name right, Mary Ellen Barthelme, who is a member of our philanthropy committee at GBMC. Mary Ellen, welcome. And also Dr. Fred Chan, who is also a physician at GBMC, but he's also the chair of the Walk a Mile event that's taking place this Saturday, April 21st, right?
That's correct.
What time?
So you can come and actually register as early as 8 o'clock and start in the pre-walk party. We'll have a DJ and breakfast and coffee, and then the walk actually starts at 9:30. But I recommend getting there earlier so that you can partake in some of the pre-walk events.
For those of us watching on Facebook, if you have any questions about the event, or if you're interested in participating in the event, it is not too late, so please take advantage of the opportunity that's provided to you via Facebook to participate in the Walk a Mile event. My esteemed colleague, Greg, over there is waving the question mark there. Greg, you have a question for us?
Yes, we have a question from Facebook from Kristen. She says, what's the best approach with educating our children and instilling in them that they are allowed to say no, even to just a hug? Wondering how we can teach them and help them feel comfortable.
That's a great question, and thank you for whoever submitted that question. We appreciate it. Thank you so much. Laura?
So that is a really great question, and I think this is something that a lot of parents struggle with, is how do we approach this subject with our children? It's not an easy topic to talk about. It makes people feel really uncomfortable. But I think it's really, really important that you do initiate that conversation with your child, and you initiate it early. I think we so work to tell our children, you need to be really polite. If someone wants a hug, you give them a hug. And that shouldn't be that way. You know, you want the child to feel comfortable, and you want them to feel like they are in control of their body, so that they can say, no, I really don't want to give that person a hug, and that is okay. It doesn't mean that the child is being impolite. And you're going to learn a little bit more this afternoon about some other techniques that you can use to initiate that conversation with your children. But I think it needs to be started early, and I think that another thing that we should talk about is using correct body parts when we're talking to our children about different areas, because that's huge when it comes to prevention and recognizing something like this happening.
That's a great point. Laura Clary, Clinical Program Manager for our GBMC SAFE program, joining us here today. And again, I encourage you all watching us on Facebook and audience members, if you have any questions, please send them on Facebook in the comment section, or for privacy reasons, feel free to send them via a private message on Facebook. And also, audience members, please find Mindy or Greg to submit your questions. We really would appreciate it. Greg, it looks like we do have another question.
Yes, we actually have 3 questions. So the first one is the program available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to victims?
Yes, so it is available all day, every day. We never close. Our doors never close to patients. So it doesn't matter if it's 2 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday, if it's Christmas, if it's Easter, it does not matter. We always have a nurse and an advocate prepared to respond whenever a patient comes in that needs us. So we are always open.
Great.
Another question is there criteria to be seen by SAFE at GBMC, i.e. a police report, a referral, or off the street?
No, so there is no criteria as far as whether or not police are involved or if they just walk in on their own. There are different criteria as far as seeing a safe nurse based off of the time frame that the assault happened. So we can come in and provide forensic services for victims that come in within 5 days of the assault happening. But we also have a really great advocacy support program as well. So even if the assault happened months prior, if they come in through the hospital, we can still provide advocacy support, even though it's not within that 5-day time frame. When a patient comes through our doors, if they had just been assaulted, they will meet with a forensic nurse who will provide all the different options that that patient has. And those options do include if they would like us to contact police, or if they would like us to provide the service without police being involved, or if they're just there for a medical checkup. And we will help walk them through that process and allow them to take control of their own health care and make that decision.
That's sort of related to this next question, is what is the extent of follow-up with the victims after the incident?
So our main concern is safety, and the thing that we always ask our patients is it okay for us to give you a follow-up phone call? And we make sure that we get a safe number that we can call them back at, and we make sure that, is it okay if we leave a voicemail? And we do after hours callback as well, because some victims cannot be called during the day for safety reasons. So they'll ask, can you call it after 6 o'clock at night? And that's fine. Anything we can do to make contact with that patient to be sure that they are okay and that they don't need any additional services. We do some medical forensic follow-ups on some of our patients that do meet that criteria, where they may need injuries or other things addressed in the future.
I want to thank our audience members for providing those questions. Laura, in our promo for today's show, we talked about, and we're excited about this, a great initiative that the SAFE program will be participating in later on this year, and that is with the Beau Biden Foundation, the Darkness to Light training program. Can you just touch a little bit about the program and what it means for GBMC SAFE?
So we're super duper excited about this initiative, and what the program really is a facilitator-led training where we teach people how to recognize the signs of child abuse, how to prevent child abuse from happening, and what to do if you do recognize those signs, how to make a report, how to really stand up and make a stand to stop this from happening within our communities. We can open it to anybody, but we really want to target that audience that works around children day to day. So teachers, coaches, rec councils, places like that. It'd be great to have this kind of training, because I think a lot of times people are really afraid to speak up, or if they do recognize something happening, they're not really sure how to speak up and what to do. And this training program is going to help to recognize the signs and then how to respond to it.
Laura Clary, Clinical Program Manager with the GBMC SAFE program. Laura, I was going to ask you who's the target audience for this training program, but you kind of touched up a little bit in your response, but can you just repeat that? Who is the target audience for this?
So really it can be anybody, but who we really want to hit is that audience that works around children on a daily basis or work very closely with children. So again, coaches, teachers, rec councils, churches, daycares, places like that that have constant contact with children, so that those frontline people really get this training, because they're really working with these kids every single day.
Let me ask you this. How vital is this program to the mission of the GBMC SAFE program? How vital?
I think it's incredibly vital. Again, I think child abuse is a topic that people don't like to believe happens right in our community, and I think engaging in a conversation and really talking about the fact that, you know, child abuse and sexual abuse, they don't discriminate, and they can affect communities and people from all different walks of life. So really getting the word out there and spreading this awareness about this topic, I think, is so important to our mission.
I'm going to hit you with one more question, because we are going to talk about this in Greater Living later on with Mary Beth Marsden and Don Scott, as they have a representative from the Beau Biden Foundation on their program. But as the Clinical Program Manager for SAFE, also as a sexual assault nurse examiner and as a forensic nurse examiner, and again, as your role as the Clinical Program Manager, my goodness, you wear so many hats. But how would you like to see this program flourish within GBMC and within the SAFE program?
So I'm really excited and I'm really proud that GBMC sees the value of this program and is allowing us to bring it here to Maryland. And right now our immediate goal is to hit a huge part of Baltimore County, because again, right in our immediate community. But what I'd really love to see is it even go further than that and start expanding all across the state and all across other states. So I think it's really great, the fact that we are going to take the lead and really move this into Maryland and really push it out into the Baltimore community, and I'm really proud to be a part of that.
You're doing a great job, Laura Clary. Thank you so much. Laura Clary,
you.
Clinical Program Manager for GBMC SAFE. It looks like we have more questions from our audience. Greg?
We have a question from Facebook. We also have a question from our live studio audience, but we also have a comment on Facebook from Jennifer Seiler. Laura and her SAFE team are amazing, and we are so lucky to have them at GBMC.
Well, if I could just comment about that for a second. So Jennifer is one of our child life specialists that work in the pediatric emergency department, and we so value the work that their team does as well. So anytime we have a child that comes in that has been abused, that needs to undergo a forensic examination, they are right there with us in that process. So they stay at the head of the bed, and they provide like play therapy and alternate focus for that child, so that while we are doing our exams, that child doesn't really realize what we're doing, and they can choose to focus on something else they enjoy, whether it be playing with a Barbie or playing with Play-Doh or something that makes them happy. So we really value the work that our child life specialists do and how they help us.
And before we get to the next question, I second everything Jennifer just said, so
Thank you.
It's well-deserved. Greg, do we have another question?
Yes, so 2 more questions. So one from Christy on Facebook. Are there tips for people who are being verbally abused or controlled by significant others to the extreme? What are the warning signs for physical violence as well?
So for physical violence, a lot of people always think that you're going to look for bruises and other things, but we don't always see that when it comes to domestic violence. And the signs may actually be invisible, and we may not be able to see it as far as a black eye or a broken bone. Of course, we do see that on occasions, but more often we're seeing patients who they don't really know who to turn to. And sometimes they're coming in through the emergency department for unrelated complaints, which they think are not related to domestic violence. So we see a lot of patients that come in with abdominal pain and GI complaints and headaches and anxiety, and all of that is stemming from the abuse that they are going through at home. So one of the huge things that we do right in the hospital is we screen each and every patient. So even if we don't see the physical signs of abuse like bruises, we're screening each and every patient in a safe environment so that they have someone that they can speak with right there at that moment. So statistics show that victims are more likely to come into a healthcare provider or an ER before they go to the police or to a shelter. So being a frontline responder in the hospital and being able to screen and recognize those patients and then providing an immediate intervention, I think is super important. And to let them know that they're not alone and that there are a lot of services out there for them.
Laura, we only got a couple more minutes before we end our program and get ready for Greater Living. So let me go back to Walk a Mile in Her Shoes event that's coming up. Like I said, this is the 3rd time we've done this. In years past, what has been the response from the community and those participants, especially men that have participated in the program? What have you heard?
Everyone's really enjoyed it. So it's a lot of fun, and it's fun to see people out there walking this mile in red high heels. It's fun just to get out there and laugh and really raise awareness and come together as a group to walk this mile. And I think it's really, it's a fun event. And again, there's music and contests and prizes, and it's just, I think it's a great way to raise awareness about a topic that we really don't like to talk about.
And one more time, in case people are interested in registering, what's the best way that they can find out more information besides visiting the SAFE program page on Facebook, but also what's the website that they can look to get
So they
more
can go to the actual Walk a Mile webpage. They can actually register right there, and that's at www.gbmc.org/walkamile. And if you can't register, you can still come the day of the walk and actually register that morning. Starting at 8 o'clock, you can come in and register and partake in the pre-walk party.
In your opinion, how has this program helped to address sexual violence, sexual assault?
I think it helps a lot, and I think, again, the community outreach that we do with the nurses getting out in the communities, into the schools, speaking at other hospitals about this service. I think since we do so much community outreach now, that we're seeing more patients who didn't know that this service was available to them, and now they know they have somewhere that they can go for help. So we've seen an increase in our volume, but I think that's because of the awareness that this program actually exists, which is really important.
Thank you, Laura. We do have time for just one more question before we end our program. Greg?
Yes, this question is from Laura on Facebook, and it's, are SAFE nurses involved in court cases for sexual assault victims?
Yes, we are. So we always say that the care that we provide to patients goes from the hospital all the way to the courtroom. So when we are doing these medical forensic exams, while we are addressing the medical issues that the patient is having, we're also collecting valuable forensic evidence and biological evidence that can hopefully link a suspect to the crime. And months down the road, we'll get a subpoena that will be needed in court, and we will go to court and we'll talk about what we do as a forensic nurse and how the exam is conducted and how we collected the forensic evidence. So we do testify as expert witnesses in Baltimore County Circuit Court and other courts around the area.
Laura, I really would love, I mean, we could go for hours talking about this, but I really want to appreciate you coming out today and joining us. Laura Clary, Clinical Program Manager from the SAFE program at GBMC. I also want to thank our audience members here today and those of you watching us on Facebook. Please stand by. The conversation about child abuse, sexual assault, and the Beau Biden Foundation Darkness to Light initiative will continue with my colleagues Mary Beth Marsden and Don Scott on Greater Living. Hey guys, how are you? It's good to see you off in the corner, and I appreciate you guys being so quiet back there. It's very nice of you. Again, I want to thank Laura. I want to thank you all. Next month, we're actually going to talk about cancer survivorship on To Your Health. Dr. Robert Donegan is joining us from the Cancer Center over at GBMC. I am so looking forward to talking about it because it's going to give you a perspective. We're kind of hoping we have a cancer survivor on our program to talk about survivorship. So again, I want to thank you all. I want to thank you those watching at home. And Laura, and to you all, cheers and to your health.
On Facebook. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Greater Living. I'm Mary Beth Marsden.
Don Scott, and of course we call this
Greater Living.
Greater Living on GBMC Facebook Live. I'm catching up.
So welcome to all of you who are joining us right now live on Facebook, and also welcome to all the people who will join us after the fact, because this will live on and on, these really important interviews that we do once a month. And you know what I've noticed about Greater Living? We do not shy away from really important, oftentimes difficult subject matter.
We don't, and I've been kind of amazed myself.
Yeah, so it's
especially with the reaction we get as well. So
it's been very engaging, and today is no different. We're going to be talking about child sexual assault, something that no parent wants to be faced with, but that every parent and every adult really in the country, in the world, in our community needs to think about and be aware of. And joining us now is Dr. Michelle Chudow. She is with Pediatrics at GBMC, and thank you. This is your area.
It is. Thank you for having me here to talk about this.
And one of the parts of your area that we need to talk about first, I guess, is tips for parents on how to prevent their children from becoming victims of sexual abuse.
Right. So I could talk all day about it. I'll try and narrow it down a little bit. I think that the most important thing when you're talking to your children is to have this discussion early, have it often, be open, be honest, be non-judgmental, listen to their questions, ask your own questions, and remember that this is most effective when it's a lifelong dialogue, not when it's a one-time birds and the bees talk.
So when you say start early, I know you started early with your own children,
I did.
And I have to say I did not. Look, it was hard sometimes to talk just about sex in general with your children. You were never sure what was the right time, how they would receive it. So when you say talk with them early about abuse, and really it's about power over their own bodies, right?
Absolutely, yeah. It's about learning how they can be empowered with their own body, how they can know their own body, just have knowledge of what their body part names are. When I say start early, as soon as you're teaching your child that this is a nose and that this is an elbow, teach them that they have a penis or a vagina also. They're body parts. And kids understand intuitively that if we give pet names to those body parts, that their parents don't really want to talk about it. It's kind of an underlying rule that, we just don't discuss that part of our body, which means that if something happens to that part of their body, they're more likely to hold that information inside rather than share it with their parents.
Growing up, I had an older sister, and I remember when my parents gave her the talk, then it was about sexual reproduction and things. And then I never got the talk. But when it came time, when it came time for my sons, I kept thinking, how soon, when should I give them the talk?
Right.
But now there's actually two talks blended into one, because you can't talk about sexual abuse without talking about sexual reproduction.
They're related. You don't have to discuss both at the same time. I don't think that there's necessarily an age that's too early to start talking about sex or about how to make a baby. It's really a parent gauging what level their child is at as far as maturity, knowledge base, development, where they are. You can always phrase things in a way that kids are going to understand while still being open and honest with them. And I think that that's really important because, again, it gives them that sense of understanding about their own body, and the more they understand their own bodies, the more likely they are to be protective of their own bodies.
Do you think that if we neglect sort of these conversations, it leads to a feeling that, well, that must be something to be ashamed of?
I think so, yes. And it's not just ashamed of, but it's also if you as a parent haven't given your children the tools and the knowledge that you want them to have, then think about where else they're going to get that information. Are they going to be getting that information
we know
from
where,
a
right?
potential abuser, from their friends, from the internet? It's easier to see porn on the internet now than it is to avoid it. And you want to be able to introduce that topic about sex, about abuse, even about pornography to your children before they're getting it from somewhere else.
I know you said all children are different, but could you give us a ballpark age when you must discuss sexual?
Before puberty, absolutely. The most vulnerable age range for child sex abuse starts around age 6 or 7 and goes up until 13. So you really want those early elementary age kids to know about this stuff ahead of time, to know that they have the right to say no. We have a rule in my house that you don't have to hug or kiss a relative or a friend if you don't want to. You have to maybe blow a kiss or wave. But in our house, if you don't want to be physically touched by somebody, you don't have to be. And that sets up that sense for kids that, oh, I'm in control of my own body. No grown-up can tell me what to do with my body.
You talked about the prevalence of sexual abuse, and obviously it's still with us, even though we know more about it and probably more aware of it. And there's probably more reporting being done today than there was 10, 20,
Thankfully,
certainly
yes.
40 years ago.
Yes.
But how prevalent is it actually, or that we know of?
Right. So by the time that they reach adulthood, 1 in 5 girls have been sexually abused or assaulted, and 1 in 20 boys have been. It is out there. It is everywhere. It crosses all socioeconomic bounds. It crosses all races, all genders. This is there. It's unfortunately part of who we are as humans. We can work very hard and persistently at prevention, but I think that we're always going to need to have these conversations with our kids in order to help them protect themselves.
Do you think there's some confusion as to what exactly is sexual abuse? I'm just curious. Like, I think, you know, if somebody touches somebody in the wrong way, the parent might say, well, you know, he's just an old man who didn't really, you know what I mean?
Yes, no, I understand what you're saying. I think that any touch without consent, any touch that makes somebody feel uncomfortable, any touch that is not appropriate for the care that you need to give a child routinely, and if you're not the person that's supposed to be giving that care routinely, by definition is inappropriate. And we need to teach our children to follow those little cues that their bodies are giving them. If they think that something was weird or strange or unusual, or if somebody asks them to keep a secret about their body, those are huge red flags.
And you talk about, you should, I'm sorry, I'm having trouble talking today. You should tell your child about 6 years old or something like that. Or most sexual abuse happens to 6 and 7-year-olds or starts there. So who does that kind of sexual abuse?
Right. So 20 years ago, everything was stranger danger. The man that's going to pull over on the van on the side of the road and ask you to help us find his puppy, right? That happens, but it's the least frequent kind of sex abuse and sex assault that we see. 97% of sexual perpetrators are male. 70 to 90% of sexual offenders on children are known to the child. These are not strangers. These are family members, people that live in the home with them, teachers, coaches,
People they
babysitters,
trust.
people that they trust. And it's somebody that's abusing that trust and has worked with that child over a period of time, has groomed that child to the point where they may even see this behavior as within the range of normal for them, or that they have been so ingrained in this abusive relationship that they don't even know how to speak out anymore. So that's why it's up to us as parents, not only to try and help prevent this by giving our kids those tools, but also to listen to our kids, to look at our kids, to pick up on those cues that they're giving us. I always say I'm a pediatrician, but I'm also a mom of 3. Parents know their kids better than anybody else will. And if you feel like something is just not right with your kid, something probably not right with your kid.
You know, it's interesting that you brought that up because I think we all watched in horror the story of the Olympic gymnasts and the parents who said, we were in the room and we didn't know what was going on. So even sometimes as aware as you think you are, it's incredible how insidious this can be.
It is, and just like offenders groom kids, offenders can groom parents as well to make the parents think that this is part of the normal routine of what should be happening.
So sometimes abusers inside a family, boy, am I in trouble. Sometimes abusers inside a family or inside a neighborhood are also protected by family members and neighborhood members, are they not?
They are, absolutely. People are always afraid of repercussions of getting law involvement. Oftentimes the answer when a child goes to a parent or a relative and says, so-and-so did this to me is, well, we can't talk about it. Somebody will end up going to jail. They'll take you away from us. Somebody could be getting deported. There's lots of pressure on children to not talk about it, which is why we see a lot of delayed disclosure, so not talking about the event with somebody official or outside of the family for weeks, months, sometimes even years after it happened, and why we see a lot of recantation. Disclosure, we always say, is a process. It's not just a one-time event.
Doesn't it make...
Growing up in my neighborhood, there was a man who everybody sort of suspected, I guess. And so one time when my sister disappeared from a picnic where John was at, and we found them together or whatever, nothing happened. But when we came back and complained about it, my parents did, everybody said, well, oh, that's just John.
That's just him.
That's just John.
Right, and we need to do better as a community at protecting ourselves and protecting our kids.
And doesn't it make you crazy when people say, well, why did they wait so long to report it?
Yes, it does. Like I said, this is a process. These kids don't always know that what's going on is wrong because nobody has told them that it's wrong. So sometimes they'll see something in school, they'll hear something on the television, it'll kind of cue them to start talking about something.
So the beauty of Facebook Live is that we can take questions on Facebook, and we're doing that right now, and we also have a studio audience, and I think we have a question, right, John?
Yes, you do. This question is for the good doctor. Can you explain about children not keeping secrets from parents, how important that is?
Yeah, so I always tell parents, my own children, that it's okay to keep surprises, but it's not okay to keep secrets. So if you don't want to tell your friend what you got them for their birthday, that's a surprise. That's going to be a good thing. But we don't want to keep secrets, especially about our bodies. Keeping secrets about bad things or about our bodies means that something isn't right. Something's not the way it's supposed to be. So that's what I like to teach.
I think one of the biggest issues facing kids today has to be the internet.
Yes.
I mean, parents are oftentimes at a loss. It's hard to police. And you say, don't keep secrets, tell your parents. But the last thing a child wants to do is tell their parents something they fear will have the internet taken away.
Right. Which is another reason.
That's a dilemma.
Yes, it's another reason it's better to start that conversation early. Before kids are going to be exposed to pornography, it's important to talk about it. Say that it's out there.
How do you talk about it?
So when I speak with my 9-year-old son, because I just started having that conversation with him, even though he's a 9-year-old in 3rd grade, hasn't been exposed to anything yet, thankfully. I said, there's stuff out there. We've already talked about what the mechanics of sex is, just as far as making a baby, and saying that this is not normal. This is mean to women. This is degrading to women. And it's not what real interactions between men and women are like. And if you see something like that, I want you to tell me about it so we can talk about it. We have a rule in our house that if anybody wants to talk about anything related to sex, porn, anything like that, you don't get in trouble. This is a conversation that we're going to have together to make sure that we all understand each other and that we're on the same page about things.
And what was his reaction? Like, I always have those conversations in the car.
Right. Car is a great place. You don't have to have eye
Because
contact.
they can't run away, right?
And there's no eye contact,
There's
which is
no eye
helpful.
contact.
Yeah.
Everyone can be a little uncomfortable, and
Yeah.
it's okay.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Sometimes I felt like there was a lot of eye rolling from my boys in particular.
Yeah.
And it was hard. But you're right. You have to have the conversation. Just keep having the conversation.
Right.
But I was wondering how he reacted.
So he, was asking, well, why would people do that? And I said, some people,
question.
some adults enjoy watching that, but it's not something that I want you to grow to enjoy because it's not real. We talked about, other things that can be fun to look at that have a little bit more internal fantasy of, as a component of that. Reading books about healthier relationships, watching movies that depict healthier relationships. I think that that's important. I mean, I haven't shown him anything graphic. He's 9. But again, you have to gauge where your child is and what your comfort level in talking about these things are. Now, that said, for a lot of parents, these types of conversations are going to be going outside their comfort level.
Way out.
And it's important that you tell your child that. Say, this is hard for me to talk about. I feel really uncomfortable talking about this with you, but it's so important that we need to have this conversation even though it makes me uncomfortable.
Oh, that's good.
And kids will really appreciate that honesty. Plus, if they feel uncomfortable talking to you about something, you've already set the example that it's too important not to talk about.
And why is it important to use the real body parts? Once again, growing up, my parents taught us different words for, not the real, a penis wasn't a penis, it was something else.
Right. So the example I always use is if somebody hits you on your arm on the playground, you have no problem telling their parent that somebody hit you on your arm because it's just your arm. There's no connotation or implication associated with it. But if we start calling a penis a wee-wee and a vagina a Susie, then we know that, trust me, I've heard every name for body parts out there. We all giggle. Right? But it's those kids, like I said earlier, like they recognize intuitively that that's something that mom and dad
You can't say
or
the word. Why can't
grandparents
they?
are uncomfortable talking about. So if they don't want to talk about it when it's normal and nothing's happened to it, I really don't want to tell them if something happened to that part of my body.
Okay, so I know a lot of people, and I also have some books too, but they just give their kids a book.
The book. Yeah.
My Body, Myself, all those kinds of
Right.
books, and those are very helpful, but that doesn't still take away your responsibility.
The books are great. Some of them are better than others. They do not pay me, but the American Girl books are fabulous.
Yeah.
They have books for young girls and for older girls, and they just came out with a book for boys talking about puberty and stuff like this. They are developmentally and scientifically accurate. But before you hand over that book, it's important to have a conversation first so that your child knows that if they have a question about something they're reading, that they can come to you for clarification.
How are you going to balance what you've told your son already and his urge in future years to learn more, to see more? You know?
Right, so hopefully, I mean, we'll see, time will tell, but hopefully I've created a dialogue with him that he knows he can ask me about questions. And when I got pregnant with his younger sister, we revisited the topic. This is not a one-time discussion. You don't tell your children only once to look both ways before they cross the street, or to brush their teeth, or to flush the toilet, right? It's over and over and over reminders. And it has to be that way with this topic also. It has to be a lifelong conversation, and that conversation has to change as your children change. So you're going to start with the young ones talking about body names, body autonomy, what is allowed with their body, what isn't allowed. Then as kids get older, we're going to introduce the topics of sex and porn. As they get even older, it's going to be about peer pressure and about consent, what consent really means, not legally what it means, but if somebody says no, everything stops immediately, right? And then talking about gender identity, sexual identity, kind of grows naturally out of those conversations. So this is a lifelong discussion that you're having with your child. And it's amazing what parents say they learn from their children as well. A good place to start the conversation, if you're not sure, is, well, what do you think you know
Right,
about
ask
this?
the question back.
Ask the question of your child. It's amazing how much they know that's accurate. It's amazing how much they know that's inaccurate. And that gives you a starting point for the conversation.
Our starting point was boobs.com.
Yes. Yes.
We saw it on our history. Oh, check the history on your
Yes, and I
your
want to
computers.
remind you, it's not just computers, it's phones, it's
Yes,
tablets,
yes.
and it's any game system that's hooked up to the internet.
Right.
So Xboxes, things like that, anything that you can have multiplayer interaction across the internet also has access to websites. So please pay attention
Yeah,
to that
this is a whole
also.
new scary world,
Right.
and it's tough on a parent.
It is. I also recommend kids do not need a web-based cell phone before they turn 13 at the very youngest. If you need to keep track of them, you can get them one of those old-fashioned flip phones. Make sure you have the internet protection protocols set on any internet-accessible device.
But a real savvy kid.
Yes, yes. But you do the best that you can.
Yes.
And hopefully, if you've already had these conversations, then they have some understanding of what is and is not
And the
acceptable.
dangers, a less than savvy parent as well.
Do you think the Me Too movement, I know this is a way reach, but there's more talk about what is appropriate behavior, what isn't acceptable behavior, what was acceptable behavior is no longer acceptable behavior. And I know this might be more of a teenage conversation, but has that helped open up the discussion somewhat?
Yes and no. Yes and no. I absolutely applaud every woman that has come forward, and the kind of the grassroots movement of recognizing sexual assault within the country and within the world because of the Me Too movement. It hasn't quite talked about children yet. Child sex abuse is one of those topics, like child cancer, that nobody ever really wants to think about, let alone talk about. So while it's opened some doors, I think it's the first step in a long path.
Yeah, we'll be talking about it for a long time. We have another question, I believe.
Yes, we do. And the question is, if I'm not 18 yet, if I'm sexually assaulted, are you going to tell my parents?
So there's a very distinct legal difference between sexual abuse and sexual assault. Sexual abuse is any sexual act done against a child or vulnerable adult without their consent, depending on age, that is done by a household member, a family member, a care and custodian, somebody who's supposed to be in charge of taking care of that child. In those senses, sexual abuse, it's a mandatory report. Doctors, social workers, nurses, anybody that is in contact with children is required to report sexual abuse. Sexual assault is different. That's what we think of as date rape, right, as far as the teenage population goes. In those circumstances, no, we do not need to report to police. We do not need to tell your family if you don't want us to. I always try and encourage the tweens and teens that I see that have been in those cases to talk with their parents. I think it's very important that their parents are part of their support system. But some children, rightfully so, are afraid what will happen to them if they disclose that their parents might blame them for the incident. And in that case, we certainly don't want to add any trauma, either physical or psychological. So we will work with those children.
And that can be so difficult because how many parents might look at this as like a mark of shame on their child, or they're embarrassed for themselves, or they don't want to take them down the legal road.
Absolutely.
That can be painful.
Yes. So just like the SAFE program has victim advocates, within the world of child sex abuse, we also have victim advocates and social workers that are excellent at what they do as far as working with these families.
We have a number of people we're talking with, but I was just wondering, like, some of the last thoughts that you would like to really get across to people about this topic that clearly you're so passionate about.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the most important things are be open, be honest, be non-judgmental. If you suspect that something may be happening to your child, don't ask them, did somebody touch you? Say to them, you know, let's review the rules about who is allowed to look at and touch your body and who isn't. And I want you to know that if you ever want to tell me anything like that, I will believe you, I will support you, I will always love you. Parents have a tendency to want to ask questions and find out details.
Yes.
And depending especially on the developmental abilities of that child or the age of that child, that can sometimes cause more harm than good. But really just making sure that you're providing an open, honest, non-judgmental dialogue is going to be the most important thing.
And is it never too late? Let's say you've heard, they've listened to you and they thought, oh, I didn't have those conversations.
Never too late. Never too late.
Dr. Chudow, thank you so
Yeah,
much
thank you.
Oh, my pleasure.
for
Thank
being
you
with
for
us
having
today
me.
and talking about this topic. And hopefully somebody heard you today.
I hope
and
so.
who needs help. And so
Thank
that would
you.
be great.
Thank you. While we change your seat,
Yeah.
we should explain to people that we're going to have Patty Dailey Lewis coming up, Executive Director of the Beau Biden Foundation for Protection of Children. We talked about it a little bit earlier in the first half hour.
Yeah, it's so exciting. GBMC is really so happy to have this initiative coming on board and really kind of works with everything they're already doing. Yeah, Patty Dailey Lewis, who is the Executive Director of the Beau Biden Foundation for the Protection of Children. Is that based in Delaware?
It is. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
That's right.
There you go. You got
We
it.
heard that. It's turned on. Just
I'm very loud.
It's on. I heard it.
It's on now.
Oh, there
go.
you are. Thanks so much for being with us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
You know, for people who don't know, explain the connection with Beau Biden.
So Beau Biden, as you know, was the Attorney General of Delaware. He was my good friend for many, many years. I worked with him for 8 years. He's also the son of Vice President and Dr. Jill Biden. Beau was a man who was passionately committed to protecting children. And child sexual abuse and preventing children from being abused either through schoolmates, bullying, or the abuse of children in general was something that he was committed to.
so how does the foundation work?
Well, we are a 501c3, so like Laura talked about, we do operate on donations. We are committed to carrying on Beau's mission of ensuring that every child is free from the threat of abuse, whether that's from an adult or from another child.
Is it handbooks?
We have a lot of different programming. I brought you one of the books we have. We've talked a little bit about this program that we're going to be doing called Stewards of Children. That's the initiative that we're working on here with the Greater Baltimore Medical Center, and we are absolutely thrilled to be here.
So this is a substructure of Darkness into Light?
Darkness to Light is the parent company of the Stewards of Children
It's a great
program.
name.
Yeah.
Darkness to Light. Cool. So your mission is it's pretty straightforward. Get the word out, help train people.
Yeah, I mean, look, there really are, and I've sat here and listened to Laura and Dr. Chudow, and we cannot talk to our kids and to our community enough. So we are focused on another program called the Shield of Protection Initiative, where we're working with schools and child-serving organizations to sit with them and look at their policies, their procedures, and their programming. What have we seen in every case of mass child sexual abuse? Afterwards, we have a lot of people who say, oh, that made me uncomfortable. I saw this or I saw that. I was a deputy attorney general for 30 years, watching from a seat that was not a pleasant one to see children who were abused consistently, and it was almost always, as I know Laura talked about, someone they knew. You know, from the time our kids are little, we talk about stranger danger, and we don't do enough talking about their bodies. We don't do enough talking about the grooming process, and we don't do enough talking about coming to a safe adult when they are in a circumstance where they need help, because we cannot go on expecting children to protect themselves. It is our role as adults to protect children, and Beau Biden felt very strongly about that.
I want to be clear about the foundation. Does it is focused primarily on caregivers, or is there direct contact with children as well?
We do both. So we go to schools and we talk with kids about being safe online. We talk with them about cyberbullying and bullying. And then we also talk with adults about keeping their children safe and what programs and policies have to be implemented to do that.
Patty, we already have a question.
Oh,
so
wow.
couple maybe.
Actually, we got two questions. Patty, to what extent are schools officially or unofficially taking responsibility for not just sex education, but also child abuse prevention?
That's a great question.
That is a good question.
A lot of states actually are now, schools are under statutory obligation to educate children and parents and everyone in the school system on child sexual abuse and child abuse generally. So for the states that have laws like that, then the schools are directly responsible for providing that information. With regard to sexual abuse and sex education generally, that is really on a school district by school district basis.
And you had another question?
Yes, we do. Actually, with all the support programs for child abuse, have the statistics shown that for numbers of children being abused decreased?
Well, there actually has been a decrease since we started working with this program. When we started working, doing mass trainings.
Directly based on your program?
Well, I'm going to hope that it is.
Okay.
I believe that it is overall
So you're
education.
taking data.
Honestly, yes. This program, Stewards of Children, is the only evidence-informed program in the nation. And it's actually in use in every state and in several different countries. So evidence-informed is really important, right? Because otherwise, you're going to get people that have crazy ideas out there putting out
It's all
programs.
anecdotal, right.
Right. So how we came to this program actually was in Delaware. We had a case involving a pediatrician who raped or sexually assaulted more than 1,000 children. The vast majority of those children were pre-verbal, which is a particularly dangerous situation because children are not able even to articulate, which I will also say that I think Dr. Chudow and Laura did a very excellent job in talking about minimizing opportunity, right? So we had this case where we had all these toddlers and babies and kids who couldn't talk or wouldn't talk, and we had parents that were really groomed from the birth of the child to believe things that were being told to them. So we knew from looking at that case, we reviewed over 8,000 patient files, that this was all preventable. And one day when Beau Biden and I were walking down the street in this town, a woman came up to him and said, "What are you going to do about this?" And of course, he gave our typical lawyer response, you know, we will prosecute this person, we will make sure they are locked up as long as possible, we will protect your children from them. And she said, "No. What are you going to do about it?"
So this was the impetus.
And he said to me, "Patty, we got to do prevention work." And prevention work, honestly, my whole career of prevention work we know has been important, but it has really taken a back seat in almost everything across the board.
Let me ask you, when you say, and I don't know about the ins and outs of this case specifically, but you say it was preventable. Boy, if you can't trust your pediatrician, if you have a pediatrician and you just have a new baby and you know all your friends are going to this pediatrician, and how can a parent, at some point you've got to trust somebody, right? I mean, go ahead.
Trust is an interesting word. Trust but verify, I believe, has been used before. So one of the things we talk about in 5 steps to protecting your children is minimize opportunity. Make sure that your kids are not necessarily one-on-one, unobservable, uninterruptible contact with an adult or an older child. I can tell you in my whole career, I have not seen a case where someone molested a child while parents were sitting there in the middle of a room, unless the parents really did not know what was happening, or in the middle of the mall. So you minimize opportunity. You ask questions. You don't just take a statement as absolutely true because the person who gave it to you is a physician. And we saw that in the case at Michigan.
I know.
It was the same thing.
But the parents sometimes were in the room.
And I know that. And we saw it in the case in Pennsylvania, in Sandusky, where people turned their child over to somebody because everybody thought this person was a great person. This is how abusers operate.
Yeah.
They really can't operate if we look at you and say, well, you're not trustworthy. I don't know you. So it's a matter of heightened awareness that this actually happens.
You have me thinking back to all the time my sons spent with psychologists, where we would go and usher them in the room and sit out in the
Yeah.
lobby. All the times we had tutors into the house, and they would be off at a distant part of the house being tutored or whatever, and we had no idea. Again, just thinking
So
back.
what are some of the red flags that we might be missing, particularly for a pre-verbal child?
Well, there are physical signs in some cases where children, they will...
Bedwetting
They
or,
will have bedwetting. They will have sores around their genitalia. They will be very, very reticent to the touch. There are children who will not want to go with a certain person. And I remember in a case one time, it was actually in the Bradley case, a father telling me that his daughter would grip on to the sides of her car seat and scream at the top of her lungs. And so for a lot of parents, you know, we've all had that kid who was gripped onto the car seat and screaming at the top of their lungs. And we had somewhere to go and something to do. So really what we want to make sure people know is just that. Understand that knowledge is prevention. Your education in terms of what actually is happening to children is prevention.
So you're taking this darkness and you're spreading more light, right? How do you decide who to partner with, where to go? This is a big, broad thing that you're trying to do. What are the goals and how do you reach that with your mission? And
So-
why GBMC?
Well, one of the things we look at is the wheel that really makes up the community, right? How does a community move? Well, there's a wheel of the community, and the spokes in that wheel involve the people who really drive the community. So who is that? Law enforcement, educators, medical providers, child-serving organizations, religious organizations. That's who we have looked at generally. And this is an awesome organization. And they have been, Greater Baltimore Medical Center has been committed to making sure that care is given to children, to everybody. But I'm saying we focus on who really cares about making sure that children are safe. And this is an institution that clearly does that. So when we first began, you know, Beau had made this promise when he was Attorney General. We will train 5% of Delaware. Because 5% training will see a cultural shift. We will then see, and you know, across our lifetimes. Remember, I grew up, I'm one of 8 kids. We never had a car seat.
Right.
What did we learn across our lifetime? We've learned that putting kids in car seats diminishes the possibility that they'll be injured in a car accident. So we know that through education, we will see a cultural shift. So Beau said we're going to train 5% of Delaware to see this cultural shift. We're going to keep on training, and we're going to move out. We're going to move to other states, and we're going to take this program to every person that will listen to us. It is our responsibility to protect children. And until we shine a bright light on child abuse, like we did on domestic violence, we're not going to see a change. But when we shine this light, it will be okay to say at a cocktail party, yeah, I don't let my kids go there. It'll be all right for parents to say, I don't allow my child to do overnights with people I don't know or in places that I don't know about. I'm a mom too, and I was the mean mom. My daughter, if she's watching right now, is probably writing, she was the mean mom. Because I knew that these dangers were out there. So really everyone should know that. And everyone should pay attention to who's around their children, who has access, and really to minimize opportunity. No one-on-one, uninterruptible, unobservable contact. That's our goal, to make sure that these 5 steps, that people learn the facts. that they minimize opportunity. You've already had wonderful guests. Talk about it. Talk about it, because if you don't talk about it, other people will. And we've seen that with children that have been molested over a long period of time. You know who was talking to them? The molester, not their parents. Recognize the signs. Look at that child who's become withdrawn and say, what are some of the reasons? Some might be because they're being bullied. Others might be because of abuse. And then finally, and this is another problem we've seen consistently, react responsibly. Call it in. You don't have to be a mandatory reporter to bring this to the attention of the authorities. In Delaware, everyone is a mandatory reporter. We have a very broad law. And now under the Safe Sport Act, that covers any sporting organization that deals with children. Everyone is a mandatory reporter. And it's everyone's obligation to protect children.
Hear, hear.
How specifically are you partnering with GBMC, though? What's going to happen?
Well, we're implementing training staff, and then we are going to use, which the Darkness to Light Foundation does for stewards of children, to train the trainer. So once we train a number of staff and we find the best trainers, and you've already seen 2 of them, we will then make sure that Greater Baltimore Medical Center trains in exactly how they want to push this out and implement it within their community.
And then you will move on and work your magic somewhere else.
Well,
right?
I don't think we'll ever leave this organization because...
No, I mean in another state. Or the whole goal is to train 5% of every state, right?
Every single state.
Right.
And we've already started working with some national groups.
I want to mention you touched on these 5 steps to protecting our children, and I'm sure that we'll get this on Facebook, so anyone who wants to see it, but I'm just going to go over it. 1, learn the facts. 2, minimize opportunity. 3, talk about it. 4, recognize the signs. 5, you just talked about it, react responsibly.
And I assume there's a Darkness to Light website.
D2L.org.
Oh, that's where that
or
is.
you can go to the Beau Biden Foundation, one word, BeauBidenFoundation.org, on Facebook or on the internet.
What a great legacy he's left. I think we have a question, right?
Yes, there I go again. Yes, we do. We have a question on Facebook. Can you give some examples? I think this is a question for Patty. Patty, can you give some examples of what grooming might look like?
Well, it can start with very little special attention. Little gifts. You'll see some schools now will prohibit any types of gifts. So I see a child that I'm interested, I start giving gifts to that child. Maybe it's things that child doesn't have. Maybe it's a cell phone. I start setting up meetings with individual children, not meetings.
secrets
How
with
about this?
children.
I'm one of 8 kids. We had a priest that would often volunteer to take a couple of my brothers to the movies, take them to the beach, take them places that, with my father passed away when I was 12, so my mom had 8 kids under the age of 13. So when somebody comes up and says, oh, can I take the 2 middle ones to the movies? And I mean, it's the priest, of course you're going to trust him.
Right.
So people work their way into a family. They come to you wanting to offer their services in a way that seems to be generous and kind and thoughtful. They are master manipulators. That's how they do what they do.
Yeah.
The book's on Jerry
Pure
Sandusky.
evil.
He always started with taking a little boy to a game. And then it was another game.
And you found
but it
kids
was-
who needed
Yeah,
that
but-
sort of father figure or parental figure.
And it was always the same system over and over
Yep.
again. So you said they're master manipulators. They are.
And they're looking for opportunities.
So as parents, it's our job not to give them the opportunity. Which does, I understand what you said, it does seem like, who do you trust?
I mean, you do get to that point where you have to be, but what's the outcome if you don't? So you have to be suspicious about.
I agree with you.
And sometimes those people seem, the type of person that it is in the situation where they are seems a little off, and that's your ding, 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 ding. That's what you need to pay attention to in your brain.
Exactly, and we tell children this too. You know those little hairs on the back of your neck that stand up? That feeling that you get that something is just not right. Trust yourself. Trust your ability to discern danger and discern that something is off, and act aggressively to protect. I don't mean aggressively as a whomping people, but
Sure.
act to protect your children, because it is our job to do that, to teach them, to provide them comfort and care.
Coming from the background that you come from, I'm just wondering, do you find that the legal system is supportive of some of these situations, or do parents fear getting entangled in something that will cause more angst and harm and not give the satisfactory outcome?
So I'm going to answer the second part, and that is yes. I do think that a lot of people do fear the system, and they fear the length of time it takes. They fear what it will do to their children. But when you think about the number of children that are molested by one single molester, when you look at a Jerry Sandusky, there is a price to pay when we don't step up and speak out. I think the system has gotten much better in the last 34 years that I've seen things evolve. I know that judges receive far greater education on this than they ever did before. In Delaware, for example, and I know in Maryland, in the counties, there are specialized prosecutors that deal with this. We actually had a whole division, and all we dealt with was taking care of children and vulnerable adults and the elderly and people that were in this system that needed that extra hand. The children's advocacy centers do an amazing job.
The CASAs of the world.
Right, the CASAs, the guardian ad litems, they do a great job in protecting the interests of children.
Before we change chairs, one thing I would like to mention, you have to tell parents that it's okay to say no, because a lot of times we don't want to say no to the gift from Uncle John because it's something the child wants. So the child wants to go to the movies, but you have to be willing to say no and stick to it.
You have to be the mean parent sometimes. You have to say, you know, we're not doing that today, or it's very nice of you to offer that, but I know that you want that new whatever set, that new telephone, that new whatever. But right now we're gonna stick with what we have, and then you talk to the adult and say, you know, I am the parent. And if you have things you want to give to my child, then you come to me first and you ask me. That is my decision. And I will tell you that when you look at these cases, these mass cases, the parents that were more aggressive in terms of protecting their role as a parent, protecting their place as a parent, you see abusers pass them by.
Too difficult, yeah.
Right.
It's like if someone's going to rob your house, no one's going to go to the house that has the dog and the
Exactly.
alarm, and because they'll go to the house that's
And
easier.
that's one of the things we talk about with organizations. If you are aggressive with regard to background checks and with regard to enforcement of policy, you don't allow one-on-one. You don't allow, for example, counselors to have relationships with kids and families outside the program. When they see that you have been through the Beau Biden shield of protection, when you know what can be done to guard against predators, they will pass that organization by and go to the next organization that doesn't do that, because they know that the people who work there are educated, they're watching, the parents are watching, and the kids are educated. So we're going to go to an organization that doesn't do that. And that's important.
I know we have to let you go because we have someone else to come on who has wonderful things to say to you, but I just have to ask you one more thing, and it's a little bit touchy. We tend to trust our children with women more than men.
Women are perpetrators too. Women are perpetrators too. And I just screened a movie that I think a lot of people will find shocking. There are women who are direct perpetrators. There are women who participate in the perpetration. There are women who keep the perpetration quiet. In the training, there's a woman named Marilyn Vanderburg. She was Miss America 1958. She was sexually abused by her father from the time she was 4 years old. And she talks about an incident where her mother is coming toward her bedroom late one night, and her father's in there, and she feels, now I'm going to be saved. She's going to come through that door. But her mother never does, because her mother makes a choice. And she doesn't choose Marilyn. And in my career, sadly, I have seen that. I have seen a lot of parents who either knowingly participate or ignore and leave a child on their own. Think about the lifelong damage that does to a child. Because what if you cannot trust the people in your life who are supposed to protect you? Who would you ever trust?
Thank
Powerful.
you. Thank you. Thank
It's
you.
a closing
Yeah.
statement right there.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You mentioned we talked to an old friend, somebody
Yes,
else we had
our
on the
next
program
guest,
earlier.
we saw her come in today, and I thought, didn't we just talk about birth and babies?
It's Melanie Dowell, or we know her as Lanny, but Melanie Dowell.
Lanny, good to see you again.
A GBMC Parent Education and Doula Coordinator. Get the official title out there.
There you
Great
go.
to see you again.
Good to see you as well. Good to see you as well.
So here you are, you're a doula, you're helping mothers, and parents in general with their babies and what to do after they're born. But this seems to be just a whole, not a different angle, an important angle, but certainly has broadened your role to me.
Very much so. I was thrilled when Greg Schaefer came to me with the program and the idea, and trying to figure out how we were going to format this into GBMC. And since the parent education program is the starting point for most parents as their introduction, not just to family, but to the GBMC community, we thought this is a great way to introduce the program. Considering we have over 3,800 deliveries a year at GBMC, we provide education classes to such a large part of those families. Why not start getting them in the very beginning? And as the doctor was saying, getting them to understand the appropriate terminology, the communication from the very beginning is what we need to initiate. Where I came into the picture and was looking at this, we used to run a class to teach parents on how to effectively communicate with one another. So it's one thing having a conversation with a child, and we're looking at this right now as three probably very reasonably bright, educated adults sitting up here that would feel confident in having that conversation with our children. But we're looking at younger families now. We're looking at sometimes 18, 19, 20-year-old children, where we would think children having children, they may never have had that education. They might not necessarily have a partner that they feel they can effectively communicate with. So how do you effectively communicate with a child if you cannot effectively communicate with your partner? So what we have designed is we've taken one class and divided up into a two-part series. The first part will be positive parenting, and the second part will be darkness to light. And the positive parenting part will be teaching parents how to effectively communicate with one another. You might have, as a child, maybe you had a little...
I could use that now, frankly.
I know, right? It's difficult. You were raised one way, you were raised a different
Sure.
way, and then all of a sudden, you have this human being, and you're trying to make decisions for their best interest and create peace and harmony
And be a
within your
team.
family, and be a team. And how many times did you say, your husband came home late and you thought, I've been here all day long, I'm exhausted, and you're off working like when he's just out eating bonbons and you're home doing the same? It's not. I mean, he has a job, you have a job, but the frustration starts there. And if that's already part of your frustration, how are you then going to deal with questions that come up about kids without already having that underlying frustration? So positive parenting puts parents together or couples together, or even care providers. So if it's a daughter and a mother that are raising a child, they are in the same room together, they're sitting across the seat from each other, and we give them different examples. If when you were a child and you had money in a jar that you saved for a family vacation, and your father caught you taking money from that jar, what would the punishment have been for you? What would the punishment have been for you as a child? Completely separate families. What would that dialogue look like with your father and you, with your father? And you will notice it's drastically different with every family. The communication or
And the theory is that would be your parenting style that you would bring.
Right.
Because of what you
I'm
learned.
coming
That's
into
what
it
you know,
thinking,
yeah.
right, you
Yeah.
know, I come into it and I think, well, I grew up in a very open-ended family. We talked about everything. It was no holds bar. And I'm married to someone who, oh, no, we don't talk about that. That's a no-zone area. If that's how we're starting off as parents, how are we ever going to effectively communicate to our children these sensitive subjects that should not be so sensitive? They should be everyday conversations.
So now we've slid from the positive parenting to darkness to light.
And that's it. So once we've worked with parents to really talk about how you were raised, what works, what resonates well with your family, to work with your kids, have peace, harmony, balance, not argue in front of children. What are okay conversations, and how do you feel like you can approach these topics together? What words are you comfortable using? And we already know they need to be the appropriate words. We need to say them out loud to each other, in front of each other, in front of other adults, so that we get comfortable with them, so that we can express them to our children. Once we've gone from that class, then we go into the darkness to light. And they're comfortable. They're already confident. They feel like we've worked out some kinks here in communication. Now we can effectively feel like we can communicate with sporting coaches, teachers, educators, parents, care providers of our children.
So you yourself have gone through the darkness to light sort of training.
I haven't gone through the full training,
Okay.
but as soon as Greg Schaefer came to me and said, hey,
is
this
coming.
is something,
Right.
I went online and took the online class that they
Okay.
have to offer. It's a wonderful online program. So I wanted to be at least very knowledgeable of what the program had to offer.
Is that something a normal person can do? Go online and...
People can go online and take the online class. I think
Okay.
that the in-class style, face-to-face, will be very compelling. And I do think, especially doing it as a couple or as a group, it tends to open up a lot more conversation, dialogue within people.
You must be very excited to see where this sort of leads.
I'm so excited.
And the outcome of it
Absolutely.
as they kind of follow.
Absolutely. Only because I think we do have the ability to touch so many people's lives in education. And if we're starting off and we have a newborn baby and we have a 2-year-old toddler, what a great opportunity for a mom to start saying, so I'm changing a diaper, and this is your brother's penis, and this is your brother's bottom, and it's different than what you have. And so there, it's a prime opportunity.
It's actually really brilliant, because at first I thought, gosh, that's you're having a baby. There's so much to think about already, but you've got I hate to say a captive audience, but you've got an audience that's coming through GBMC. There's so many people having babies at GBMC.
Vast audience.
That's a great place to capture those parents before this big thing happens.
And we're looking to initiate it from the very beginning. This is the very beginning. We're catching them before they even have a baby. So I am thrilled to be able to really start off with this program, and it should launch fairly soon.
That was my next question. You're doing positive parenting now. You haven't touched on the darkness to light
We have
yet.
not touched on the darkness to light until we're finalized with the training, and I see that that'll probably happen pretty
I
soon.
just wondered if there would be any friction on the new parents' part, because you're all starry-eyed and...
Yeah, no, I actually, we have such a young, savvy, educated, sophisticated group of parents and families that come into GBMC, and we can, I mean, I look at myself now as the older generation, and I'm working with this younger generation. So when they come in, they are already so in tune to so much of this, and they're human sponges. They cannot wait to absorb more. They can't wait to post online. Took this fabulous class through GBMC. I mean, we're going to have a mom's group. We're going to do stroller hikes. We're going to talk about all of this as an open forum and have guest speakers. So I think the idea that all of that is there, it's not just a social connection for moms, but it's a necessity for our families.
Is there a way for other parents to participate? What if, someone's watching and maybe they have a 12-year-old or whatever, and they think, Well, I could learn a lot. I could still learn a lot.
Absolutely.
Can they join into some of these programs or?
Absolutely. It doesn't have to be just for new and expecting parents. We have a class that we currently run right now for babysitters. It's called Select Sitters. And part of our conversation in our Select Sitters, there are children that are age 12 and older that we do CPR certification for, how to be a mother's helper. You have to be 13 or older in the state of Maryland in order to babysit a non-sibling, so to get paid to be babysitting. And we're looking to try and incorporate a portion of this into that as well, because we do talk about in that class appropriate touch. They're hearing it from their parents about, well, you might have to change a diaper. Well, if they're changing a diaper and a child calls it, again, their Susie, they might not know what the Susie means. They might not know those names. So it's important for that babysitter then to say to the parent, are there specific names they have for their pacifiers or for their blankie? And a parent may say, oh, and they also call their private parts. That's a great opportunity for a child to educate a parent and say, oh, really? You know, I was always told it was a penis and vagina, and that was a really safe way to communicate effectively with my child.
Oh,
So
that'll go over well.
I think we're going to be seeing, but I do think we're going to see some children educating and creating comfort zones, which
Well, you're
is
changing a
great.
generation.
We are.
Which is, and,
But that generation is changing us. They're young, they're savvy, they're network oriented.
You, and in your experience as a doula, because you do, it's not just about you're following up, you're checking on the breastfeeding,
Yes.
it's all of that. Do you find that issues have cropped up in the course of your time that have raised a red flag, that you worried about what that baby or toddler is being exposed to?
Absolutely. There are times, I think more often than not, where we will work with a family on finding childcare. And that's one of the services that we offer, where we will help to interview. They don't know the questions to ask. They're not comfortable with the appropriate questions. So sometimes it's having that extra set of eyes and ears there, and cueing in. And there are things to look for childcare, making sure
That's
that
scary, that.
it's a very
Yeah.
scary process. But you know, most moms have to go back to work after 12 weeks. And are
If they're lucky.
If they're lucky, and are you going to have someone in the home? Are you going to go through a private facility? Is it an open door private facility? How does this work? Can you look on your phone at any point in time and see where your child is? But these are the questions to ask. And also, have they attended a program like Darkness to Light? So the more parents that we hit, the more parents we reach. I would love to hire you as a child care provider, but I need you to attend this class, just like I need you to attend CPR, just like I need you to know signs of illness for my child. My expectation is you have attended a class like this so that you're as cognizant when you're taking my child to sporting events as I would be as the parent.
Another person we turn our children over to.
A child
A
care
child care
provider.
provider, yeah.
We don't
You know,
think about it.
Well, I think you think about it, but.
You do, but you don't think about the responsibility we're
Right.
putting on that person as far
Correct.
as ensuring the safety.
Right.
Sometimes you think about how lucky you are to have found someone.
Right, or,
Yeah.
there's that
Yeah.
fear factor. Sometimes, there's always a letting go.
Sure, cutting of the cord and
Yeah,
letting go and
and,
walking out the door,
right.
but making sure that we are instilling the responsibility of that child care provider, not just for the care of our child, but to be aware of where they are, what they're doing. And we don't necessarily trust the coach or every single adult. They have to be educated as well.
So sometime in the near future, every parent,
Yes.
every new parent coming through GBMC will.
Well, every new parent through GBMC, anybody in GBMC, anybody within the community will have the opportunity to sign up for the class and take the class. Probably, I would say, sometime this summer.
That's great.
Okay.
We've not mentioned in the hour about the Walk a Mile.
No, we have not.
And I know we have a lovely graphic to show about that if it's
Which might
if it's
come up. There
available.
it is,
There it
yeah.
is. So
But,
that is this Saturday, and this not only supports child sexual assault. This is domestic violence, all kinds of sexual assault, and a great way to sort of bring it to light.
It's
and
fantastic.
It really. Are you wearing red shoes?
It is so much fun to watch everyone walk around in the
I
red
love the
shoes.
men in the red pumps.
When I
like
saw
4-inch
the
heels.
original work being done, and they were doing the marketing and the pictures, and I believe maybe Greg was wearing some red high heels at some point in time. It was spectacular.
Yeah.
All the pictures at GBMC with the board having on red tennis shoes, it's just amazing enough.
Yes,
you walk by this big photo and you say, oh, it's just another corporate photo.
Yeah.
And you look and everybody's wearing red tennis shoes to
fantastic.
promote the march
So
and,
this-
to keep GBMC's SAFE program working.
Yes, and that's where the money goes, to help the sexual
Yes.
assault programs, and you can still participate. You can go to gbmc.org to find out more.
Yes.
And speaking about the future, we will next be meeting with you on May 9th when we'll be talking about cancer survivorship. It should be a very moving program. We'll have at least one, maybe two cancer survivors on our hour, and I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, I think we all know someone who's been touched by cancer.
Absolutely.
May 9th.
Lanny, as always,
Thank
thanks.
you. It was
Thanks.
great to
Come
see
back
you.
again.
I will. Thank you so much.
See you in the lobby.
Thank you.